I'd like to welcome you to the September 25th, 2024 regular meeting of the Palm Springs Planning Commission. Can I have a roll call, please?
Chair Wormick,
Present.
Commissioner Baker,
Here.
Commissioner Miller,
Present.
Commissioner Murphy,
Present.
Commissioner Rotman,
Present.
Commissioner Morrell.
Here.
Can I have a report on the posting of the agenda, please?
Yes, Madam Chair, the agenda was available at City Hall on the exterior bulletin board as well as online by 9:00 p.m. on Thursday, September 19th, in accordance with our policies and procedures.
Thank you. The next item is the acceptance of the agenda, and we have been asked by the Department of Special Programs if we would reverse the order of item 2B and put that ahead of 2A. So if that's acceptable, and I could get a motion to that effect?
I'll move reordering the agenda for 2A and 2B.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. The next item is public comment. It's time that's been set aside for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on consent calendar, agenda items, and items in the general interest, items of general interest within our jurisdiction. Please note that the Planning Commission can't take action on items that are not on the posted agenda. 3 minutes will be allowed for each speaker. Testimony on public hearings may be offered at this time or at the time of the hearing. Members of the public who would like to comment on the consent item or new business items must testify at this time. Are there members of the public who would like to testify at this time? And if you're here on one of the two public hearings, you may also testify at that time.
And there are no speakers online, Madam Chair.
There being no speakers, public comment is closed. We're going to the consent calendar. Does anybody have any comments on the consent calendar? I do. We agreed to some change in the shade language for pedestrians in the downtown zone and other commercial zones. And I was wondering if we could get, and Chris, you mentioned that you would have language to that effect.
Not prepared to read it now, but the consultant is already working on that language. So I think if you want to include in the motion that we address the direction of the Planning Commission at that hearing to revise the downtown shade policies to make it clear that it's not just downtown, it's the whole city, then we will make that change in the final version that we finalize. But we have the video to refer to.
So I would like to suggest that we add an item that the commission addressed shade policies to not just be in the downtown, but to be in the entire city. And I don't know if there is a motion and if people would accept that comment.
I'm assuming you're referring to the minutes regarding the land use plan?
On page 4, yes, adding a number 9.
Okay. That's where I was thinking. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Can I also add to that?
Yes?
So in the last hearing, we talked about reclassifying Racket Club, and I didn't see that mentioned. And I know the discussion at that time was to work with engineering on whether that was feasible.
We can go back and review the video. I don't believe that made it into the motion. Did it make it into
I
the
believe
motion?
it did.
It
It did?
did
Okay.
not. I don't think it did.
Then we will add that in as well.
Okay, thank you.
We would add items 9 and 10 as directed tonight.
Is there a motion?
I so move.
Second.
Can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Rotman,
Yes.
Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Chair Wormick,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy,
Yes.
Commissioner Morrell.
Yes.
The next item in front of us, and that passes unanimously, is a request by Rupert Street LLC for a conditional use permit to operate an 11,691 square foot cannabis cultivation facility involving incidental Type P packaging and labeling, cannabis manufacturing at undeveloped parcels totaling .74 acres at 19070 Rupert Street, Zone M2CO. And just speaking to what I believe is in front of us, and we're limited in this one, we're looking at the mitigated negative declaration and acceptance of the odor plan and acceptance of the CUP is in front of us, but the development permit is something that, if we approve this, will be approved by staff, and it will not come before the commission or, I believe, the Architectural Review Committee. Am I correct on that?
That is correct, Madam Chair. I believe Noriko will talk about this in her presentation, but this is a result of the changes that were made by the Planning Commission and City Council a few years ago when we established the cannabis overlay in order to incentivize those businesses to locate in this particular part of the city by alleviating some of that process on the back end.
Staff report, please.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. As introduced, the project in front of you tonight is a conditional use permit application for a new cannabis cultivation facility. The project site is a 0.74 acre undeveloped parcels that are located in the M2, which is a manufacturing zone, as well as cannabis overlay zone. The city established a cannabis overlay zone with an intent to designate the area to support cannabis-related businesses. The project proposes a new 11,691 square foot cannabis cultivation facility, which operation includes incidental cannabis manufacturing, which is a Type B packaging and labeling, and the cannabis transportation and distribution. The conditional use permit application in front of you tonight is just to review the proposed cannabis cultivation and manufacturing uses, and the cannabis transportation distribution use is permitted by right in this zone. And as the director mentioned, this application review excludes site and architectural design review, which will be reviewed under a minor development permit application if this conditional use permit is approved. And the application is, the review of a minor development permit application is subject to review and approval by the Director of Planning Services. And as previously mentioned, an initial study was prepared for this project to analyze the potential environmental impact of the project. And the odor control mitigation plan has been reviewed and deemed accepted by the Office of Special Program Compliance. If this project were to be approved, the business will employ 10 individuals for the operation of the facility, and the business will operate 7 days a week between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. As the staff mentioned, the site and architectural design review is not part of this conditional use permit application review tonight. However, staff is just going to mention the quick site layout that's proposed for this project. The site is designed with a building which is 11,691 square feet, which will be located in the northeast section of the lot. And the site is designed with a parking lot and a trash enclosure along the south property line. And the building will be surrounded by the landscape buffer on its west and north elevations. And the site will be accessible by a Rupert Street. The proposed building, this is elevations for the proposed building. The proposed building incorporates rectilinear form and line, and it incorporates a mix of two building heights, which is 20 feet and 30 feet. And the design and the size of the proposed building are relatively compatible to other existing commercial developments in the vicinity. And this is a floor plan of the proposed building. The interior section of the building is divided into multiple areas to support different stages of a cannabis cultivation and operational needs. And areas such as grow room, mother room, and a veg room are dedicated to cannabis cultivation, while other areas such as dry rooms and trim room and the manufacturing area are designed to support post-cultivation activities. And as staff mentioned, the cannabis odor mitigation plan has been reviewed and deemed acceptable by the Office of Special Program Compliance. But the facility will operate under a controlled environment to manage cannabis odor. And the multiple air filtering and diluting processes will be involved in the odor control for the proposed cannabis facility, such as a pressurized condition to prevent odor escaping from the growing area into hallways. And then also the applicant is proposing a box within a box construction, which is 2 layers of walls to reinforce the odor containment within the facility. And just to show what's being proposed for the security of the building, the applicant is proposing to install the cameras in the multiple locations within the building, as well as panic buttons, video recorder, and alarm panels. The security plan is subject to review and approval by the police departments as conditioned. So, excuse me. As staff mentioned, an initial study has been prepared for this project, and the initial study concluded that there is a potential for the project to impact biological resources and cultural resources. However, such impact can be reduced to less than significant with the implementation of mitigation measures that are included in the recommended conditions of approval, which is attached to the staff report. And as a part of this conditional use permit application review, the adoption of a mitigated negative declaration is recommended by staff. And today, we do have our environmental consultant, Ms. Nicole Christ from the Terra Nova Planning and Research. If the Planning Commission has any questions or clarification relating to the environmental study. If the Planning Commission approves this conditional use permit, the applicant is able to operate the cannabis cultivation and the manufacturing facilities. And in reviewing this application, staff thinks that the proposed project is consistent with the intent of the general plan, and the site is appropriate for the proposed uses, considering the fact that the site is located within the cannabis overzone, which is intended to support cannabis-related businesses. And the approval of the project will not alter the industrial and the commercial character of the site's vicinity. And the recommended conditions of approval are appropriate for the approval of the proposed use and are necessary to protect the general welfare of the public. And in conclusion, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the mitigated negative declaration as an adequate environmental document and associated impacts for this project and approve the project subject to the conditions of approval. This concludes the staff presentation. Tonight we have Ms. Veronica Goodhart. She's the director of Director of the Department of Special Program Compliance. And we also have a city's cannabis odor control consultant, Mr. Jay Takas. And then also, as staff mentioned, we have Ms. Nicole Christ from Terra Nova to answer any questions relating to the initial study. And this concludes the staff presentation. Thank you.
Hi, I just have one background question, and this is regarding the employees, since this is sort of a sealed, contained space. Do they have to wear does the state require a respirator or something for people that work in the back during the operating hours? Okay.
Yeah, we may.
Wait, just a minute. I have a question for staff. Yeah, just, the staff report referred to a reciprocal easement between 6 lots. Can you point out where that is? And
Yes. Oops. So the 6 parcels, actually, the 2 lots that include the project site and the 2 lots that are immediately east of the project site, as well as the 2 properties that have been developed.
to the north?
To north, correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I had a question on the trees. I don't know if this is for staff or for the applicant, but it seemed like all the trees are along the front of the building and not near the parking lot. And I thought the objective was to shade the parking. That's the reason why we have trees usually.
Yes, so do you see the circles that are shown on the plans?
Yeah.
These are actually trees.
Oh, okay. I don't think they showed up on the elevation. Yeah.
The
Okay.
elevation, the building elevation you're referring to?
Yeah, they show the ones in the front, but I don't think I saw these in the parking lot. But-
Yes, the intent of the rendering is to show the building design, not so much of a landscape design. Yes, thank
Gotcha.
you.
And we would, as part of the minor development permit application that will process following this approval, should it be approved, we would make sure that they comply with the parking lot landscaping requirements, and that would be part of that review process, certainly, yeah.
Right.
On trees, what I see here, this is since staff is going to be approving it, and it's not part of our jurisdiction, but the Desert Museum Palo Verde is shallow rooted. It comes down in wind, and it has been diseased throughout the valley. And most of the landscape people I know are not recommending planting it at this time. So I think it's, the Chilean mesquite, I think holds up pretty well. It does need to be trimmed so that it doesn't crack in half in the windy season, but it's holding up. So if staff would take a look at the trees and make sure that the tree species, it's a beautiful tree, it's just a shame it's struggling right now.
Absolutely, and thank you for the feedback and the expertise. We'll certainly discuss that with the applicant as we finalize the plans.
Ms. Goodhart, you're on.
Required mask or protective clothing. There's no state requirements. I've visited several different cultivation sites, and it's all dependent on the employer. Some do require that they wear protective equipment, some do not, but the smell is usually very concentrated, so most will wear some type of facial mask protection.
Question for you. We used to require a shower, but my understanding is that that's not well used in places that it's been built into, and there are other ways that employees' clothing can be cleaned from the cannabis odors and debris.
We currently have one active cultivation site now that the others have ceased operations. We actually visited them last week, and they have a shower and said that it was actually very helpful because, especially during when they trim, because there's a lot of residue that stays on your skin, so they can ensure that they wash that off before they leave.
Thank you. And if the odor consultant is here? If you just generally explain the plan to us and how you reach your determination that it's a good plan.
Yeah, the general process for the review is to follow the procedures and recommendations that are posted online and for the applicants to follow. In general, it is to calculate the amount of ventilation air that is required to be within a building, and that is to ensure that that is brought into the building, maintaining negative pressure throughout the operating characteristics of the building. That odor, that airstream is then captured, centralized inside of a localized area within the building. It is filtered through an activated carbon filter, which mitigates the odor through adsorption technology, and then it is exhausted at a dilution rate that is at 7:1. And those values are based on some historical codes based on hydrogen sulfide and dilution for other odorous activities.
So if you were outside of this building on a Monday afternoon, would you smell odors
No, the reasonable expectation is that you would not smell cannabis odors at the property line.
at the property line so that it wouldn't impact its neighbors?
Correct.
Thank you.
If you could actually just state your name for the record.
Oh, sorry. My name is Jay Takis. I'm with 15,000 Incorporated. We're the odor control consultants for the city of Palm Springs.
And I had a couple, does anybody else? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure the right person to ask, but with the box-in-the-box technology or construction, how do they treat the ceiling and the roof to create that sort of box in a box?
Yeah, just from I didn't take a look at any of the building plans, but I did see that it was an open web truss system, looked like concrete tilt-up. So likely they're talking about in a box is a furred wall section and a drop ceiling below the trusses. So you would have your structure with a concrete tilt-up. You'd have a furred wall built out, which would be your secondary layer. And then below the roof and truss layer, you would have a ceiling. The inside of those spaces for cultivation is generally like an FRP, something washable. Okay. But generally, you see 2 levels of skins inside of that building. I should add that box in a box isn't necessary for the odor compliance. The negative pressure of the building takes care of the concerns that were previously brought up years ago with box in a box, and for some older buildings that were leaky, that were not built to withstand pressure relationship changes. New construction, designed engineered system to mitigate the odor, that would suffice for the odor mitigation. But the box in the box is an absolute better layer of control for it and protection.
Thank you.
And just a question for you. The Planning Commission has traditionally required an inspection of the mechanical equipment at 3 months and 6 months, and then biannually. Has that system worked? Have you been familiar with it?
We were just talking briefly about this. We're going to be establishing a procedure to come down shortly and do the inspections that are required of the conditions of approval, but we have not gotten deep into it. We've done a few of them, but we haven't had a comprehensive effort yet, but we will be beginning that shortly.
Okay. And then for Ms. Goodhart, just a couple of other questions. We've traditionally required bike racks, and I know that in your evaluation, do people use them in these facilities?
No, because where the cannabis overlay zone is located, it is rather out of the city where it's more difficult to commute via bike to those locations. I have not seen any, we've had very limited numbers of cultivation centers, but the ones I've gone to, I haven't seen them utilized.
And people wouldn't bike from Cathedral City if they lived there?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. And I will have a question for you later on renewable energy, but I want to go to Ms. Christ next. Are there other questions for Veronica or can we bring you up for the...
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I looked and read through the report. I had questions in 2 areas. One is sewer, because this is going to be on septic, and how is that handled? And is there a plan to bring them off septic eventually? Can you talk to us a little bit about intermingling of this, or what happens with septic here
Yes,
for this
ma'am.
kind of use?
My name's Nicole Christ. I'm with Terra Nova Planning, and we prepared the initial study. For septic system, there were 2 questions there, so let me separate them out. There will eventually be access to sewer at this site. It is up to Mission Springs Water District to extend that, and they are building a new treatment plant which will eventually be able to serve this part of Palm Springs in addition to Desert Hot Springs. As it relates to sanitary sewer, cannabis facilities are required by the Regional Water Quality Control Board to separate out the domestic sewer from the cannabis cultivation materials that are produced and disposed of, and the board requires that they test those regularly and dispose of them through a licensed provider.
So cannabis waste doesn't go through the septic system?
Correct,
So it's just a septic field for human waste?
correct.
Thank you. The other question I had was on energy, and I believe that the energy use of cannabis facilities is very high, and yet the impact on your study, it didn't show a great impact on your study. So I was just wondering how you think about the energy requirements.
Well, under CEQA, the analysis is whether the use is wasteful. Because this is new construction, because they'll be required to comply with all of the codes, from a CEQA perspective, this is not a wasteful use. It is a higher use than most other commercial land uses.
Thank you.
Real quick. So after, speaking of waste, what happens when they trim the residual? Because that can't just go into the trash, does it?
I don't believe that they can put it directly into the trash. I think that there are disposal requirements for that as well.
Oh, similar to like a healthcare setting where you'd have to have contract with the disposal
There
organization.
would be a separation of the waste, of the solid waste.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rowland.
Yeah, going back to the septic issue, when I read through the staff report, I thought the Mission Springs Water District recommended against a leach field, and that they were requiring a septic tank. And is that an above ground or is that an in ground?
If you're referring to the tank, are you referring to domestic waste or the cultivation waste?
I'm not sure I can answer that.
Okay.
I just remember reading that. I remember reading about the separation, but it wasn't clear to me when they were. I clearly remember them recommending not having a leach field; that it needed to go into a tank.
And they did in their comment letter. It was unclear to me when I read the comment letter whether they were referring to the sanitary sewer or the cannabis waste. The cannabis waste cannot go into a leach field. It has to be tanked, and it has to be has to be sucked up by this disposal service that comes and empties the thing.
Okay.
The leach field is still used sometimes for septic systems if the soils support it. But in order to be able to get a regional board permit for that, they would have to, the firm that puts in the septic system would have to demonstrate that the leach field has the types of soil that would allow for the dilution of the materials, and there will be a tank for solids.
Okay. And will the tank be above ground or in ground?
In ground,
In
sir.
ground. Okay. Thank you.
And just maybe as a point of clarification, I'm just looking at their letter, and I think that they were specific on the cannabis waste. So I think it sounds like that's been addressed.
And Chair, if I may, Rick with the Engineering Department,
Yes.
there is another piece there that is kind of left out. So that area is considered a groundwater protection corridor. And so the Regional Water Quality Control Board, in addition to the septic tank requirements that they have to get those approvals from County Health, the Regional Water Quality Control Board also requires that they have a on-site sewer treatment batch plant that actually gets constructed there too. So that kind of treats the sewage waste before it goes into septic tank, before it goes into leach field, and essentially those are going to be throwaway devices once Mission Springs actually has a sewer system on hand. So that's another little piece that you should be aware of. So that might be something that Mission Springs was referring to.
Thank you. Oh, going to, okay, you did answer my energy question. Other questions? I have one for Ms. Goodhart. In the past, the Planning Commission has required that the applicant get their power from Desert Community Energy, getting something from solar or wind. And we've had those requirements. We understand that there may be feasibility issues attached to that. If we put in a condition that we require this, but allow you to make the determination on feasibility and applicability, does that work for your department?
Yes, and I did request that we add our Director of Sustainability to that determination as well. So there was two of us reviewing, just to make, for transparency purposes as well, just so we could both review and make that determination.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I did want to follow up on the cannabis waste. The state has very strict regulations on how it's disposed of, and they do have to be removed by a disposal company that has that certification. So Palm Springs Disposal Service does offer that.
That's interesting. Thank you. Okay. The applicant has 10 minutes.
Madam Chair, procedurally, if you first open the public hearing.
Oh, yes, at this point, I am opening the public hearing, and the applicant has 10 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Ramon Baggio of RBCAS. I think this is my first hearing that's not on Zoom, so I appreciate the fact that I get to wear my whole outfit. Firstly, thank you, Noriko, for your work and patience in helping us get through this complex process. I do appreciate and understand the role Planning Department has in ensuring a city's appearance and attention to environmental concerns. I have witnessed myself the deterioration of neighborhoods when Planning Department has a more passive role, especially as it concerns cannabis businesses. Excuse me. So for this site, I think the number one concern for any community is first security. As discussed earlier, there will be multiple cameras. There are very strict state guidelines on what these cameras do and how long they record and their connection with the police department. This particular site will also have a guard service during operational hours, and there'll be a very strict protocol for how people enter and exit the building. There'll be sign-in sheets. Obviously, everyone will be recorded. And there is also the regular state inspections for security and making sure that all the things are followed. I think we've already discussed odor control compliance. I wanted to clarify something about box within a box. This will not be simply furred out drywall in the box, and this also refers back to energy, renewable energy. The client, we're actually designing this building with what are called DPS panels. These are diversified panel systems, which basically are refrigeration panels. So this isn't your regular R13 or R20. These are R50 panels, and they're covered on both sides with galvanized steel and FRP and then foam. And this is the walls and the ceiling. So yes, this kind of construction, I believe, would play a significant role in reducing not just odor, but energy requirements for sustaining this building. I've been to hundreds of cultivation sites, and those that choose in the beginning, like, oh, I don't want to spend that money on DPS panels because they are considerably more, regret it later because an R50 wall does a lot more than an R19 wall, or an R50 ceiling does a lot more than the required R13 ceiling that most of these places have. And again, we're talking about a concrete tilt-up, and then galvanized steel, FRP, then 4 inches of solid foam, then galvanized steel and FRP again. So that plays a huge role in decreasing the cost. The plans right now satisfy all of the existing easements, and I want to make sure it's clear here, even though the application says manufacturing, there is no extraction proposed here. No ethanol, no butane. I understand the city has had problems with this before, and I want to make sure it's clear here that we are not proposing any kind of extraction. So when we say manufacturing, we're talking about pre-rolls and cartridge filling. My clients have read through the conditions, are willing to accept them, including the most recent additions that were emailed to us this morning. The bicycle racks we have no problem with. I'm going to, hats off to anyone who wants to ride in Palm Springs their bicycle to this place. That would be incredible. We're a little concerned about the renewable energy aspect of this. Again, my client we are spending the extra money to triple insulate the building. We would hope that when this is reviewed and the client is going to be paying his electric bill, that he's not going to be required now to pay 3 times the amount or double the amount to get power when he's already done even more to insulate the structure. Again, with new construction like this, if you have an old warehouse in downtown LA, I completely understand. Those things are dilapidated, and then those guys put it together with drywall and duct tape. I've seen them. This is not the case with this particular structure. Finally, I wanted to introduce the applicant and the property owners, Vahik and Anna Tatusi. We're actually from the same neighborhood in Woodland Hills, so we made the long drive up here today to do this. They are excited to be members of the business community here, and they are open to any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Any members of the public who wish to speak? Is there anyone on Zoom?
We have no additional speakers signed up, Madam Chair.
And are there any questions of the applicant that we want to get into the public hearing? So I won't close it yet.
Yeah, I have a question for the applicant. I was wondering if this is your first cultivation facility, what experience
Okay, it's not
you've
mine.
had.
I've done
Yeah.
about 400 of them across the world. This is their first cultivation facility. I'm sure you guys have seen hundreds of people go through this. I think you can notice these are not your typical cannabis cultivation facility applicants. They are, having been with them now and working with them for over 4 years, these people are very aware of the pitfalls that have come by the cannabis industry, having seen the problems that the cannabis industry is having now. So they have witnessed the mistakes and are ready to, are prepared to build a facility that's state-of-the-art. And they have, including myself, the consultants there ready to help them on how to build this and be successful at the same time.
Will there be anyone from ownership living closer than Woodland Hills or?
Well, they're running a cannabis facility, so I'm assuming they're going to be living there because it's a pretty hard industry to be doing this. But yes, of course, they will be planning on
Somewhere local.
living close by, yes.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll schlep their son there and tell him to sleep in the dry room or something.
And you mentioned security. It's not 24/7 security? I didn't hear you say 24/7.
Well, the cameras are working 24/7. It's still to be seen. Now, remember, if you've seen the site plan, there will already be a gate at the front. I've witnessed a lot of sites dealing with security issues of people literally driving trucks through garage doors. We're dealing with a steel front. We're dealing with a concrete tilt-up. And I'm all about preventive. They need to look at this place and say, okay, that place is a concrete bunker. And that plays a huge role in deterrence for security. So it's yet to be seen whether or not it'll be 24-hour security guards. That could be cost prohibitive, but certainly during operations.
Thank you.
Commissioner Murphy.
I just want to make sure I understand the intention on use of renewables for the building. Is it accurate to say that the decision hasn't been made yet as to what extent renewables will be used to power the building? Like solar panels, for
We
instance?
actually just got the email this morning, so we didn't even have a chance really to discuss it. As I understand with my discussion earlier with the director, correct? When they actually start operating and determine what their energy bills are, the decision will be made then by the client on how they want to proceed. You know, quite frankly, the email kind of scared us this morning because, you know, we thought, okay, now we have to put solar panels across the whole parking lot or solar panels across the whole building. We weren't sure what this meant. Now, we understand now that this is about where we purchase the power from. And we would like the commission to consider that let's first get open and then determine what those are. We've taken a lot of measures here. I've seen sites fail just because they can't pay their DWP bill, or they rack up a $200,000 bill that they haven't paid in months, and then they close down, which we certainly don't want in this case. So I believe that we've designed the site above and beyond what's needed to insulate it for cases like this. So we're asking that let's not make that call until we actually get our first energy bill, and then they can decide, okay, we're going with this or we're going this. It's in my opinion that we've more than designed this facility to be as efficient as possible.
And Madam Chair, at the appropriate time, I'm happy to give perhaps a little bit of background to the commission on some of those discussions.
If there are more questions, or since we're on this question, do you want to give the background?
Yeah, there's a bit of background here that I think may be useful and relevant for everyone. And I think in some previous cultivation facilities that the commission has considered, you all have tackled it in different ways. So there is one cultivation facility that has opened recently where the commission included a condition that requested that they consider purchasing the 100%, I don't think it's called renewable energy, it's a carbon neutral, or I think that might be the term that both DCE, being Desert Community Energy, the city's renewable energy source, and Southern California Edison offer, which essentially says you're purchasing your power from 100% renewable energy sources. So that was a condition that was placed on one particular business a number of years ago. They've since become operational. They are doing it, and so that's one sort of success story. However, there are also other examples where that condition was imposed, appealed to the city council, overturned, because there was a lot of concern raised by the cannabis industry that this was cost prohibitive and infeasible for them in light of all sorts of other financial constraints that are facing the industry. So at the time of one particular the most recent one before this one, where we had that discussion, as I mentioned, the Planning Commission imposed the condition. That was appealed by the applicant to the city council. They had a discussion about it, and at the time, as I understand it, they removed the condition but directed that staff further look at implementing a policy around how these facilities should use renewable energy or not. That process is still underway. I think there's been a lot of conversations with industry representatives who are concerned about the feasibility. The Sustainability Commission has reviewed it on a couple of occasions and have failed to find consensus on it because it is a difficult conversation and there is a cost differential. So I think from staff's perspective, the policy is still being worked out. And I think our recommendation to you would be, I think, some version of the condition that Chair Wermick read aloud, which is let's encourage the applicant to consider it, work through the process, and then in coordination with the Director of Special Programs Compliance and Director of Sustainability determine at that time if it's feasible or not and whether to apply the condition based on sort of what we know about the state of play at that time, if that makes sense.
You're still, are there other questions?
We can do more bike racks and make everyone ride.
Your bike rack probably needs room for 1 to 2 bikes. And that may be the son's bike if he's being forced to live in the trim room.
Right.
Okay. There being no other members of the public and no other questions of the applicant, the matter is before the commission. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So I'm going to start this off. I had talked with Chris about this issue because we'd seen these conditions and I wanted to know where it was. What we worked out was the applicant shall endeavor to use 100% carbon-free power via Desert Community Energy, or SCE, to satisfy the primary power requirements for the project and reduce the impacts on greenhouse gases. A determination on the feasibility and applicability of this requirement shall be made in coordination with the Director of Special Programs Compliance and the Director of Sustainability, leaving them to work through whether or not this applies. There's any way that it can apply, whether it should apply to this building, given the special circumstances that we have. But they are our two experts, and they were given the sort of the charge by council to figure this out. So I think this signals that we still have a concern about the high use of energy on these buildings, or in these buildings, but it's not, the condition as written isn't firm, and it allows staff to work with the applicant on applicability. So that's the proposal that we came up with. The other conditions, this was a standard one. Inspections of mechanical equipment shall be required at 3 months and at 6 months, and then on a biannual basis by an independent third party chosen by the city and at the applicant's expense. And this is just to make sure that the odor control equipment is working as soon as the building is up and running, and that it stays working. And that's a protection to the neighbors, community around it. And the third is the traditional one we've had for every warehouse, that bike racks shall be located at the site in accordance with PSZC section 93.06.00. And with that, if there's more discussion, I mean, this is a great project. We'd like to see it go forward. It's well thought through. And I think these are conditions that allow flexibility and yet still keep the issue of greenhouse gases, our concern about greenhouse gases alive. Yes, Commissioner Murphy.
Can you net out the process you envision with this condition? That in terms of, at the end of the day, it will be up to the business owner to determine to what extent, if any, they use renewable energy.
I think it's that they shall endeavor to use it, and maybe we could get Veronica to talk through, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but how you would go about working with this.
I guess what I'm looking for in the question is assurance that the owners of the business would have the ability to make the determination as to whether they want to spend, in some cases, additional money to, say, install solar panels on the roof or whatever.
Well, in the past, I know that solar panels have been extremely difficult because just the amount of energy needed to power these grows, that it would require literally like a field worth of solar panels. So I know there's other options. I can only refer to our most current cultivator, who is in the program for the carbon-free energy, and what they have done to make it less cost restrictive is they have special lighting that SCE approved because it has lower usage for energy. And they also have installed systems for even like their air conditioning, where if one room requires more air conditioning compared to another, it will pull the energy to the one room. So there's a lot of things that the operator can implement in their construction that'll reduce their energy needs. So if they do opt for the carbon-free energy plan, it's not as expensive. So that's something that we could definitely work with this applicant and provide them that information. I know SC even has grants for the lighting for these cultivation sites to assist them so they use less energy.
Thank you.
And my understanding is that this is to encourage them to use every method they have to reduce their energy budget. Yes, please.
The lights that will be used for this will be the newest technology of LED. They actually produce less heat than the HPZ, the standard bulbs that were initially used. A lot of growers, when LED first came out, poo-pooed it and said, oh, it doesn't create the right product, blah, blah, blah. Now they've all embraced it. And these produce about 30% less heat, so therefore you need less HVAC, less dehums, less power. And as she said before, systems are now in place where the energy is distributed according to when the plants are actually needing to grow. In other words, the rooms are not on all at the same time. They're off for the nighttime cycle, and then they're on. So it's not like all the lights are on at the same time. But really the biggest difference that's been made in the last few years has been the technology around LED. And they have embraced it just because no one wants to pay more for HVAC when your light is producing way too much heat.
The issue is before the commission. Comments?
I would just sort of second what Commissioner Murphy mentioned about, I too would want to make sure it was ultimately the applicant's final decision on how they choose to get their power. These uses use more power, yes, the city knew that when they went through the process of allowing these and approving these. I don't think we single out such a use for any more strict requirement from where they get their energy usage than we do with anybody else around the city. So as long as that condition is written such that there's a lot of flexibility and it's not an absolute, but a recommendation and a goal of trying to come up with the most sustainable energy sources available, I think then I'm okay with it. But I wouldn't support it if it was an absolute requirement to go with DCE.
Chris, do you think we need alterations to this?
I think it's flexible, but I can see how one might interpret it as, and I mean, it was written, I think, with the intention that the Director of Special Programs Compliance and Director of Sustainability would ultimately be the ones to determine it, not sort of in the inverse. So I'm wondering if there's additional language that could be added. Essentially, maybe there's something in there about the delta or the sort of, the differential between sort of the underlying rate and whatever that carbon neutral rate would be, a determination would be made based on there not being a significant differential between the two. Or the other way to write it, if a majority of the commission wants, is to just perhaps take out the second sentence and just say the applicant shall endeavor to do it. I mean, that's pretty loose.
I think the idea was that the applicant work with them for other ways of saving energy.
Right.
And so the determination would be by staff that they have worked to save energy sufficient to not have this requirement.
Perhaps in that first sentence, and I know not everyone has it in front of them, it says the applicant shall endeavor to use 100% carbon-free power via Desert Community Energy or SCE to satisfy the primary power requirements for the project and reduce the impacts to greenhouse gases. Perhaps there's something we add in there, or alternative ways to reduce energy demand and energy use.
Or provide sufficient alternative ways to reduce energy demand.
Subject to approval by the aforementioned directors.
Well, they're not reducing the energy demand. They're just providing ways to get the energy into the building. It's where is that source of energy coming from? Is it coming from solar or windmill, or is it coming from?
I think what the idea, Didn't realize my phone was still on. The language that I would put in this is that they do this to either reduce or provide other means of reducing greenhouse gases, reducing energy uses, so that if they're doing tilt-up and special panels, that's the mitigation that people are looking for, that sustainability. And so it would be that they make, either they use this or they provide means of reducing.
But do you need to establish a baseline of what's acceptable and what's not? I mean, that seems like,
I
that's
can't-
opening up a can of worms.
I can't do that. That's why we have Veronica and
Yeah.
sustainability. And they're still charged with this by city council to come up with this.
Yeah.
The alternate, if I might, is since there is a policy process that's underway that has been directed by both the Planning Commission and City Council previously, is to say that, the applicant shall comply with whatever policy the city implements, should it be in effect at the time of building permit up or something to that effect. There's not a great solution in here, I think.
Well, isn't that required even without being said, though?
Yeah, you're probably correct, yeah.
I think what we want is a standard policy that encourages people to use the latest technologies to reduce energy usage. And I think that's what we're looking for.
Yes, although I would say I still have a concern. They're still gonna, I want them to be able to look at economics of the various systems and available power sources that are out there. And until the city council says, this is what everyone in the city of Palm Springs is gonna do with your new building in terms of where you're getting your energy from, I don't think we should single out a cannabis use. I'm fine with saying the applicant shall be encouraged to find alternative sources for power other than from SCE. But beyond it being a recommendation that they do their best to look at all of the options available and make the decision based on their own, I feel uncomfortable. I think I like what Director Hadwin suggested as a potential solution is to remove the one sentence and leave it in as the applicant shall be endeavored to explore alternative means.
But I think we could also just, and say with consultation with the Office of Sustainability.
So flip it, leave it sort of as written with the addition of, and consider alternate ways of reducing energy use in consultation with those directors.
But we're mixing our metaphors. We're not reducing energy use by using
Sorry,
DCE.
yes.
Right.
That's
No,
just.
no, I know, I'm saying there's two things, right? There's one is buy into the 100% carbon neutral and/or consider alternate uses
Right,
of
yeah.
reducing energy demand.
I think the encouragement should be that they look at alternative renewable sources of energy.
Okay.
But not mandated. From my perspective, we shouldn't be mandating it in the condition.
If you mandate it, aren't you setting up a very difficult enforcement issue? I mean, is Veronica going to be the ultimate enforcer or?
Is the enforcer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the way that it worked for.
She does a good job of it, too.
And there is the existing cultivation facility that we mentioned that is using that program currently, and other programs that Director Goodhart had mentioned. So there is sort of a process in place for that. Again, I don't think that we're looking at this as necessarily being mandatory.
And it wasn't written to be mandatory.
Yeah.
So can you remove that one sentence, and are we there?
Should the commission direct us to do it in their vote, we will do so.
Could you reread that again as
Could I
currently?
are we leaving, okay, so where I think we've landed is that The applicant shall endeavor to use 100% carbon-free power via Desert Community Energy or SCE to satisfy the primary power requirements for the project and reduce the impacts to greenhouse gases, period. Does that sound right?
Well, that sounds like the way it was written, but that's not acceptable.
I thought you asked to remove the second part of the sentence. Was that sustainability? And the wording there is endeavor, right? It doesn't say shall. It doesn't say that they have to, or it says they shall endeavor to. But
No, shall endeavor to explore those sources of energy, but not require them to use them.
okay, I think we're getting hung up in semantics here. I'm reading this as what you're indicating. But if
Okay.
you want it to say the applicant shall explore. The
Well, I
use
think
of,
if you're
then we can do
comfortable
that.
if you're comfortable that it's not a requirement that the city is going to hold when it comes in for building permit, and you don't see 1,000 solar panels on the roof, you're not going to hold up the building permit, or, similar, then you're the enforcer. I mean, the city is the enforcer of the condition. So if you,
I'm the enforcer today, but I think to your
Well,
point.
you could finish the second sentence, determination of the feasibility and applicability of this requirement shall be made by the applicant in coordination with the Director of Special Programs and the Director of Sustainability. So if you just added the words shall be made by the applicant.
You could
I
say
think it
solely by the applicant in coordination with or consultation with. That would make me comfortable.
So the second part of it would read, a determination on the feasibility and applicability of this requirement shall be made solely by the applicant in coordination with the Director of Special Programs Compliance and Director of Sustainability.
Okay, we've got that. The second one is the inspections. Are there any concerns about that? We've done that. The third is the bike racks. And so that's before us just a request that the city look at the trees for the survivability of the proposed trees on the location, since the city's making that determination. And then that's a motion. I'll make it. Does anybody want to second it?
sure.
Second?
Okay, can you call the roll, please?
Chair Wormack,
Yes.
Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy,
Yes.
Commissioner Rotman.
Yes.
Commissioner Morrell.
Yes.
Good luck. Invite us to your grand opening. Remember us when you get there. Thank you. And we want to meet your son. Okay, does anybody need a break before we go to the next item? I think okay. This is public hearing 2A, a request by Mark Temple, the owner requesting a 2-year extension of time for tentative track map TTM 38042 to subdivide one parcel into 31 single-family lots located at the east terminus of Verona Road, Zone R1E.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to give you a brief staff report, the Planning Commission reviewed a architectural development plan and the tentative track map for this project back on September 14th of 2022. They were given a 2-year time frame to start commencement of the project, which is usually a grading plan issued. Time has lapsed, and we are here today to request an additional time, a 2-year extension of time for the tentative track map. In your staff report, there may be some errors in, say, 1 year. This actually is for 2 years. So just to correct any kind of confusion in the staff report. The parcel in question is a 6.44 acre lot at the end, the terminus of Verona Road and the north end of town. The application was to subdivide one lot into 31 lots for single-family residential. The original application included a rezoning of this site to the R1E zone, which is a 5,000 square foot lots, and the Planning Commission did do that action. So looking at the parcel, this is an aerial photograph, and the Casa Verona project is in the red triangle. I would like to point out that one of the reasons why the development hasn't moved forward, according to the applicant, is that the Serena Park development was not completed, or there was questions as to if the project would ever come about. He's more comfortable now that the Serena Park development has a new owner and a new development agreement. Not that this project is dependent upon Serena Park, but there are certain similar development issues that both face. The tentative track map that is before you shows the entrance to the development off of Verona Road and a series of one main road with 3 cul-de-sacs. And here's an illustrative drawing of what the development could possibly look like. So the application before you is to not really review the track map itself. It's to, do you feel that the findings can be made to extend 2 more years so the applicant can continue on with the work of getting it developed? So the findings that the Planning Commission needs to make is that the TPM is consistent with the R&E zoning, that the site is physically suited for the development, and there are other findings that need to be made as far as the applicant has made substantial movement in keeping the project going. In your packet, there were some drawings of potential elevations of what the houses would look like. These are not before you. These are only for informational purposes, that the applicant has spent time and money working to look at the lift system for the sewer, which is an issue out there because of the way the dike and the wash slopes there. So the applicant has been making some forward momentum, and he may want to describe that when he comes to the podium. So that concludes my report. Staff is recommending approval of a 2-year time extension to allow the applicant to pursue development.
Are there any questions of staff? Commissioner Rotman?
Yeah, I know we're not reviewing the site plan, but I do have a question about the setbacks. What would the front and rear yard setbacks? Is that already part of the track map, or how would it fall?
Well, it would need to meet the R1E zone standards, and they're reduced in the R1E zone. Off the top of my head, it looks like they're at 5 feet or 8 feet.
For the side or rear, or what?
For the front.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
And the side looks to be 5. So that
Okay.
was the whole nature. It was to increase density and allow these smaller lots subdivisions to occur.
Okay, thank you.
This was, perhaps if I could just, this was, for a little bit of background, the Planning Commission and City Council had gone through a process to establish the R1E zone. Prior to that, we didn't have a zone that allowed single-family residential development of 5,000 square foot lots. And so this is actually the first subdivision that was processed under those rules that were adopted by the council, I want to say around 2021, around then. So this is the first one that we've seen sort of move through the process. And this was really in response, the way that we were seeing a lot of the small lot development come in was through the planned development district process, which just becomes untenable and unmanageable over time. And so we wanted to try and move development out of that into a more by right scenario. So that's what you're seeing here. So they are small lots with very reduced setbacks, but that was the objective.
And it was modeled in one of our historic neighborhoods.
I had a question for staff. There's I believe it's a proposal in the zoning code that all developments of 30 houses or more have 2 means of egress, and I only see 1 means of egress here. I realize that code is just proposed right now, but I wondered if anyone looked at the egress. I know it was an issue for the fire department.
Well, the fire department has provided conditions of approval, which are in your packet, so they have reviewed this. I'm not familiar with that, that
I
reference.
think there's likely other ways that the fire department would address this, and I don't know specifically on this project, but often when you see the cul-de-sacs that you see, that's a fire sort of code requirement to allow sufficient turnaround for the fire vehicles. You know, they may have other mitigation measures that they would want where there's a lack of that second point of egress, but fire has reviewed this and signed off and provided their conditions.
I just wondered if that code actually went through in the next 2 years and the applicant had to come back to us, if this would even be permitted.
There would be, some of that would be addressed. There would be sort of provisions on the effective date of some of those changes that would likely, something that had been approved before those changes would likely be able to go forward under the old rules.
Also, there's no, from what I read, there was no on-street parking, so guest parking all has to be within the property, the home lot. And
Well, each of the houses has a garage, one-car garage. And there's no requirement to provide guest parking. If it was a apartment complex or condo complex, then they would have to provide guest parking, but there isn't for a single-family residential development. So guests could park on Verona Road and walk into the development.
And again, I think the objective here and the layering on of a multitude of changes to state law that are sort of, you know, pushing us even further than this. Our R1E standards are really looking at residential parking standards and trying to encourage much higher density residential uses here that are eliminating a lot of parking requirements, so that this is kind of an impact of all of that broader housing conversation.
yeah, it seemed to me, and maybe this is a question for the applicant, but if you're marketing these to smaller families with 1 or 2 children, there's really no recreation area except for the kids to play in the street. Doesn't seem like there's enough property around the houses to do much.
Right, and I would just remind that this is an extension of time, so we're not really in a position at this point in the conversation to be sort of rediscussing those items.
Sure.
Those comments, though, are interesting because we're going to be looking at the zoning code, and those are things we can take a look at. I know when this came through, I wanted to see a pocket park of some sort, and we couldn't do that within the way the zoning was written because we had left it off. We hadn't thought it through. So there are issues here that would be illustrative for us in the future, like the number of cul-de-sacs and not going through and having no pocket park requirements, and things that we can take into account later. This is our first experiment in trying to create a zone for smaller lots and allow it to come in different areas of the city, so small parcels like this could be utilized.
I think that's exactly right, and I know I had talked to you offline on a different matter, but this is an example that our zoning code team is looking at specifically to see how the new R1E rules, you know, resulted in this and where they might be improved to address some of the items that are coming up. So we'll continue to work through that.
But if that's the end of the comments from,
Well, I was just going to kind of piggyback on what Commissioner Morrow was bringing up, and I would think Lot D there in the southeast corner, I think that's drainage, if I'm not mistaken. For all intents and purposes, knowing our rain habits here, that's probably going to be a mini park, essentially, or a dog park, and you're adjacent to the Whitewater Channel, so hopefully they'll actually have to be able to have gates out to the wide open desert, and that will become play area for any kids that would be at
if
the.
and when Serena Park is developed, immediately adjacent to this is a park area that is required to be public. At this point, I'd like to open the public hearing. If the applicant is here, you have 10 minutes.
Anyway, Mark Temple, thank you for your consideration and time tonight. I'm a long-term permanent resident in Palm Springs, and I'm really proud of the city and think everybody's done a good job. And, you know, we've just seen a lot of changes over the city over the years and stuff, and I think we're in a pretty sweet spot. I think our primary objective, you know, is to get the project developed, but there are some really positive things, and probably number one is the Serena Park project, because that kind of sets the whole tone, and I'm pretty confident with SunCal and their company and what they're going to do, we're going to see some really good stuff happening up there. And the CV Link is pretty neat too, because it's all being built right there, which is, you know, a really nice amenity for kind of this area of town, and you can get right on there and ride your bike and do a lot of things. And, you know, just from the economy and the interest rate drop here recently, so there's some pretty positive things. And obviously, you know, we have to submit our architectural drawings and things of that sort, you know, to try to address and make sure we're satisfying our potential buyers and their needs and things of that sort. Well, that's all I have, unless you have some questions.
Thank you. Does anybody have questions of the applicant? Are there any members of the public that wish to speak?
I see
Thank
none,
you.
Madam Chair.
The public hearing is closed. Thank you very much. Just want to say that I was part of setting the standards for extensions years ago, and this fits exactly into the matrix as to when an extension is appropriate. They've done work on it. There is a reason that it's an actual physical reason why it's taking longer. And if someone would like to make a motion to approve.
I'll move approval, adopting a resolution determining that the project is exempt from CEQA and approve the 2-year extension of the tentative tract map subject to conditions.
Commissioner Murphy, would you like to second that?
I'll second that motion.
Can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Miller,
Yes.
Commissioner Murphy,
Yes.
Chair Warmick,
Yes.
Commissioner Baker,
Yes.
Commissioner Rotman.
Yes.
Commissioner Morale.
Yes.
Congratulations. It's been approved unanimously. Thank you for your work on this.
Back here with some architectural drawings and stuff too.
We look forward to seeing you. Okay, there is no unfinished business. We have no new business. Are there any planning commission reports, requests, or comments?
I've got a question actually for Director Hadwin. What, are you at liberty to tell us the status of the EIR for the large warehouse north of I-10 that we had seen draft of? Is that moving forward?
To, my colleague here,
Right.
who's been managing that.
Yeah, that's my project, and it is in recirculation. If you remember the Planning Commission, I don't know, some of the members may not have been on the commission at the time. You reviewed the project at a study session and requested an additional alternative be analyzed and aesthetics be analyzed. And that was done in the time frame that the first comment period was for the draft. Because the Planning Commission requested that, there had to be another, those had to be added to the EIR, and we had to recirculate it. So we are now in the 45-day review period, which ends October 10th. So the project is most likely scheduled before the Planning Commission at the November 11th meeting.
And can you talk a little bit about the appeal on Oswett?
Yes, so I think I had mentioned at our last meeting that that we received 2 appeals for the Prescott Preserve application that you all reviewed at the end of July. One was from an adjacent homeowners association, and one was from Desert Chapel, who's also an adjacent property owner. They had slightly different grounds for appeal, but it was scheduled to go before the city council at the last city council meeting just about 2 weeks ago. We received a lot of correspondence sort of at the 11th hour as we were preparing for that hearing that just raised some additional questions that we hadn't worked through before, and that the applicant, Oswit, hadn't also been aware of and wanted some time to look at. So we deferred that appeal hearing to October 10th to give us time to work through that. So that's currently where we're at. So we're just kind of working through some of the questions that were raised that really relate to some of the discussion that you all had on it when you heard it in the first place, which is disagreements over the terms of some of the leasehold interests and leases that exist on some of the various properties, some of the ownership structure, and of course the ongoing litigation that is between the HOA and Oswit. So just some additional information that we need to work through, but that will go on October 10th, and we'll see what City Council does at that time.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention, I don't know if people are going to trade dates on the commission liaisons. There has been one date trade to date. Commissioner Rotman is taking January, and I am taking July for him. If anybody else needs to trade, if you would.
That means Commissioner Rotman has the pleasure of doing 2 months in a row, is that?
It's your old stomping grounds. You'll enjoy it.
Hopefully they're light schedules.
If anybody, I have some family coming in April. I think it's going to be over the April 7th. If anybody wants to trade me for April, I probably can still make it work, but if anybody happened to want April to give me another
I could
month.
trade April for September.
Okay. It doesn't really matter to me. I mean, why don't we trade with Commissioner Morrow, because that's only a month then. So we'll just flip-flop April and May. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
And can you send out reminders to people?
Sure, we can work on that. And I do want to, one important clarification here. The calendar for 2025 is very much in draft form. There's some additional city conversation going on for all the various boards and commissions and city council about how we account for holidays that are not just the official publicly recognized holidays, but also other religious holidays and conflicts that we want to make sure that we're not interfering with. So the caveat here is this is draft, and the precise dates within each month may shift as we finalize that schedule, which typically happens by the end of the year. So as the dates change, we'll not only reflect some of the trading that's happened here tonight, but also the specific dates for each month in 2025.
As people here, if you're new, you'll see that November and December typically have only one meeting, just so you can begin to plan that way because of the holidays. And we are dark in August, but we're not dark in terms of the code. So in case they have emergency things they have to give us, we might be forced to take a meeting in August if it was an emergency meeting. But typically staff has worked with us to keep that as a more of a holiday time. Yes. And match we're the only commission, including city council, that has the requirement that we have to take meetings if it's required. So just to let you know that there's always a possibility of an August meeting.
We'll certainly do our best because staff like the break just as much as the commission.
And we were very unhappy when we had to, the first couple of years I was on it, we had August meetings.
The other thing that I would say about this is, and this can come out, it will include you on our distribution of the agendas. I don't think that there's no obligation that this be attended in person. There's the Zoom link that we allow the applicants and public to participate in, so we're certainly okay with that. How you engage is certainly at your discretion. I would certainly always defer to the chair of the ARC, who now is Lance O'Donnell. But it really is for the purposes of being available if they want to call on any questions for clarification about what the Planning Commission decided or provided direction on, or to report back to this group on any decisions that were made.
Although I think the one thing is, because we often have issues that we'd like them to look at, if you're at the meeting, you should feel free to address that, to find some way with the chair to address the Planning Commission's request that they review certain items. Director's report.
So the only additional thing that I have is an update on the general plan. So really appreciative that we got through that. I know it was a lengthy review, and we appreciate all of the feedback that you got. We'll get those minutes corrected. The tribe is now sorting out their review process, so it needs to go to both the Tribal Planning Commission and the Tribal Council. We expect that they will do that. They're also in the middle of their budget deliberations, so there's just, some capacity that we need to work through there. But as I understand it, they're going to try to get us their sign off and review by about mid-November. And so I'm saying this just because that's putting us into our own sort of, as Chair Remick mentioned, we only meet once, including the City Council, once in November and once in December. We also have an election and a change of council in there. So it's looking like this may not go to our council until the December meeting, which may or may not mean that we have 2 new council members looking at it for the first time. So we'll see how all of that plays out, but that's an update on that.
With that, I want to thank everybody for your participation tonight and adjourn the meeting until 5:30 on Wednesday, October 9th. Thank you.